And when he said things are different than they have been in centuries, he was also right. There's a great book, a great read by Richard Fletcher called The Barbarian Conversion. And it's a book about the Christianization of Europe from 500 AD to about 1500 AD. For about 1,000 years, most of the countryside of Europe was pagan, and this book goes into how each nation was Christianized by the monks, essentially, and by missionaries. And during that time, evangelism, of course, was a long and radical process. The people didn't have the basic furniture in their mind of what Christianity was about. They didn't have a Christian understanding of truth. They didn't have a Christian understanding of God, of a transcendent personal God, a Christian understanding of history, the Ten Commandments, nothing. They didn't have a Christian conscience. And therefore, evangelism was a long and drawn-out and radical process. We'll talk about that in a second, actually. But then around 1500, things changed. And almost the entirety, you could say, of Europe, all the cultures were based on Christianity. And when people were born and raised and educated, they were educated into a Christian way of thinking about things. Nobody really doubted the Bible, hardly. Everybody believed in an afterlife. Their understanding of God, their understanding of sin was essentially a Christian one. And the doctor was right, because after 1500 AD in the West, all evangelism really was an additional program. People knew something about Christianity, but it wasn't personal. They believed in sin, but they had to be shown that they were sinners. They believed in Jesus, but they had to be shown that you needed a personal Savior. You needed a program. You needed a campaign. You needed a week of preaching and music, and you had to get people in and look in between the eyes and say, you need to do what you know. They had Christian consciences, they had Christian intellects, but they didn't have a Christian heart. And they weren't converted, and therefore that's right. But the doctor said, something has changed. And the demon is in far deeper. There are no magic bullets anymore. You can't just do a program. You can't just do a simple gospel presentation. You can't just sit down with people and say, God, man, Christ, faith. It can't be done. They don't get it. The demon's in too deep. And here we are, the church having completely lost, at least in the West, its missionary habit, its missionary mindset, 500 or 600 years ago. And yet we need it because we no longer can deal with it. The demon's in too deep. Now, is the doctor right? That's a remarkable thing. Guys like Dr. Lloyd Jones were way ahead of their time. He's talking about this in 1959, and it would be excusable for you to think that he's exaggerating. You might say, well, maybe things like that happen in Britain, but look at us. Look at all these people here. This is a very big auditorium. We're filled with Christians. Aren't there megachurches growing everywhere? Isn't it just well known that evangelicalism in America is growing by leaps and bounds, and it's becoming a force? So surely Dr. Lloyd Jones was exaggerating. No, I don't think so. He was a bit ahead of his time, and you have to remember a couple things. First of all, he was in London in 1959, and in general, this new situation, this deeper demon, this new situation in which the Christian background is gone, and that no longer will ordinary evangelism work. It happened in cities before it happened in the rest of the country. It happened in Europe before it happened in North America. It happened in the Northeast and on the West Coast before it happened in the Midwest and the South, and so on. And that means to this very day, in parts especially of America, there are pockets of what Flannery O'Connor would call, and it's a great term, Christ-haunted people. There still are sections of our world in which you couldn't say they're as Christianized as they used to be. And yet there still are lots and lots of people who are Christ-haunted. They have a cultural memory that's fairly long, and they still are traditional. They read the Wall Street Journal's opinion pages, and they like them. Okay? And they're traditional in their values, and they're kind of conservative people. And there are plenty of places in this country where you still can grow a really big church with the old kind of evangelism, which is you have good preaching, and you got great music, and you have great ministries to families, and you get a crowd, And in the crowd are scattered people who are traditional in their thinking, and they're not, they basically have the furniture and they need to be roused. That's what Dr. Lloyd-Jones said. They need to be awakened. You need to say you're a sinner, but you haven't seen it's personal, and you believe maybe in Jesus, but he's got to be your Savior. And they get converted, and it's easy. So there's plenty of places where what Dr. Lloyd-Jones says, was going away is still true, but they're shrinking.